I am so happy to be talking about Cities Skylines. This game holds a special place in my heart, as it was my first real simulation game, and also caused one of my first parasocial relationships with another YouTuber. More on that later. But first, let me tell you about one of my favorite games. The long and short of it, Cities Skylines is a city building simulation game. Cities Skylines was developed by Colossal Order and published by Paradox Interactive in 2015. This game puts you in the role of a city planner and mayor of your very own city as you lead it to a metropolis utopia, or watch it die to a natural disaster, or a disaster by your very own hands. Ever wanted to deal with the stress of becoming an urban planner but with none of the pay? Great, put your pants on because we have a traffic catastrophe to fix. You begin by choosing a map, and while they all have their own little distinct differences, they all basically play the same. Some things to concern yourself with is the amount of water, natural resources, and most importantly, buildable area. I'd also throw a personal suggestion in there by saying pay attention to variations in elevation the map has. Hills and city skylines do not behave in a player-friendly way and make for a bad time if aesthetics is important to you. The game does a decent job tutorializing while staying open-ended, and I believe the game's more vague ideas and quirks are extrapolated very naturally as you progress through the city sizes. I was a little harsh on Dwarf Fortress in my last video, but after replaying this game, it cemented further how important a decent tutorial is to the enjoyment of complicated simulation games. Although comparing Cities Skylines to Dwarf Fortress is absolutely apples to oranges. Player agency is limited in some way as you start your city, because the game locks certain systems and buildings until you progress further into a city's lifespan. The game contextualizes this as you're a beginner mayor/urban planner, therefore you can't build a nuclear power plant as your first building, for example. Mechanically, this eases you into the more complicated aspects slowly and at your own pace. For returning or experienced players, you can skip this intro grind at the cost of losing the ability to gain trophies. While I mentioned that player agency is limited, Colossal Order made sure your creative and individual tastes are not ignored. You absolutely can be creative and unique from the moment you place your first road. I will encourage new players to not stress so hard about the first city or two, because it'll be impossible to make it perfect until you know what's coming to you in the later milestones. For now, you should use the zoning tools to start placing commercial areas, residential neighborhoods, and industrial wastelands. Watch as the population and hopefully your income starts to grow. As you progress through the loosey-goosey milestone system, you can start building education systems, fire and police systems, and entertainment systems. Most importantly, you begin to unlock public transportation systems. Let's speak about those in a minute, but first, it's around this time in the game where you start to notice something. With Paradox Interactive published games, there's always an elephant in the room. A loud, greedy elephant. Let's all say it together. DLC. That's right, microtransactions. Some of the DLC is too big to be counted as microtransactions, but that word is all-encompassing nowadays. I'm not unopposed to DLC. I think businesses have a right to a profit. However, the DLC list for Cities Skylines is exhaustingly extensive. So much so that there are multiple guides, videos, and tier lists just to navigate the slew of dollars this game wants you to spend. The DLC for Cities Skylines has a good side and a bad side. Good side? You do not need all the DLC to have a wonderful time. Bad side? You do need some of the DLC to have a wonderful time. The ones I suggest that are mandatory are the Industries DLC and the Campus DLC. These two add huge additions to gameplay, and honestly I cannot believe the Industries DLC was not included in the full release, as it simulates a very natural start to most real-life towns. Things like lumber, ore, oil, and farming. A couple DLC I do not feel are mandatory, but that I have had a good time with include park life, mass transit, plazas and promenades, and Sunset Harbor. These have personally enhanced my gameplay, but you don't really need them. Everything else is garbage and not worth the money. Good news is the game and DLC are often on sale, so I suggest picking them up then. A little more about the DLC before we move on to the mid-game stuff. I mentioned you need DLC to have a good time. That's because the game definitely feels hollow when you're running it vanilla. You will find yourself placing the exact same building in every city over and over, building the same stupid-looking generic industry with the same boring commercial and residential zones. Without DLC, the road design and public transit have to carry more weight in order to deliver a fun experience. And I felt that when I played it around 2016 or 17 or so much so that I abandoned the game. After getting into a career with a bit more cash flow and the 2020s doing their thing, I had more time and more money, so I researched which DLCs to get and found a gem of a game that I recommend to everyone. Let's get into mid-game, because this is where the magic truly happens. I want to preface it by saying everyone's mid-game is going to look different and start at different times. Just like Dwarf Fortress, there's really no wrong way to play this game, but I identify my personal mid-game as a city that is self-sustaining enough that I can leave the game idle for 10 minutes and come back to a healthy city still turning a profit. The idea now is you want to be able to focus on micro projects throughout your city, while not worried that the city itself is full of trash or dead people or losing money. Now is when I like to start a college campus or a third industry type. But more importantly, now is the time to begin incorporating elements of public transit. I'm going to try to stay concise when talking about public transit, road hierarchy, and highway interchanges, but it's a difficult task because the road designing in this game is the 8th wonder of the world. I cannot express how joyful you feel cleaning up a messed up intersection and watching traffic unclog, or designing an industry area where trucks and workers get to where they need to go with minimal hiccups. Trains, monorails, even blimps, this game has it all. Designing roads in Cities Skylines is practically a game in itself, and is where I want to talk specifically about a couple things: attention to detail and online community. The attention to detail is going to make or break the enjoyment of the player, because on the surface it seems repetitive to place a road that allows a truck to get from one building to another over and over again, especially if all you're doing is just plopping roads and buildings willy-nilly. Instead, there's so much fun to wring out of this game if you just stop and smell each building. I mean, the roses. What do I mean by this? Cities Skylines gives you the ability to not necessarily customize every part of the buildings, but you can decorate to your heart's content, and the game hyper encourages you to be thinking ahead and knowing that you will always be building bigger and wider. What starts as a simple logging operation will turn into a mass forest industry that you need to account for, inputs and outputs, manufacturing goods, delivering those goods to a warehouse, then picked up and brought to the market, then sold, then taken home, all while there's 1,000 other vehicles trying to drive on the same roads. Your colleges get bigger, requiring bigger sports stadiums and attract hundreds of cars in a split instant. Are you equipped to handle that? Or is your city about to gridlock? Do you have room to build yourself a tech hub with skyscraper offices to attract more taxable population? Do you even have the money to do that? I feel City Skylines' fun factor increases exponentially the slower and more deliberate you take it. At least for me, that is the case. Because when I rush to build a giant section in the city, that is where most mistakes and frustrations come from. Oftentimes for me, this frustration leads to a lot of Googling and YouTube, and for those that saw my last video, no, I will not go on a rant this time about Google. However, in my journey to solve different problems is when I discovered a YouTube channel that genuinely changed how I viewed YouTube as a whole. The name is City Planner Plays. It's self-explanatory, but he is a city planner who plays city builders. In 2021, I began looking at his YouTube channel and incorporating his techniques and methods into my own gameplay. And what was once a fun little game became an obsession as he unlocked so many thinking points that I had never considered before. Oftentimes, I would watch a tutorial of his and end up not even playing, just sitting there with my wife, enamored by him building a trumpet intersection. I highly recommend his channel. He's the reason I got YouTube Premium, and I fell in love with other YouTubers, ultimately inspiring me to start this channel. It can all be traced back to him. I will link his channel in the description below. Does this contradict the point I made in my previous video? As a reminder, I mentioned games need to do their part to tutorialize and onboard players to vital game systems, instead of relying on the community, Google, and YouTube to do that part for you. In Cities Skylines' case, I believe the game does a fine job of teaching you its systems that it does not end up outsourcing its knowledge to the community. Therefore, there's no complaint to be had. Let's move on to the late game. I haven't often been to the very late game because I get almost there and then get inspired to make a new city. It's a hard habit to quit. Quitting alcohol was easier than making it to the end game of Cities Skylines. But from the few glimpses I've seen, there are buildings that require special challenges and other unique buildings to unlock that basically act as cheat codes, such as the Eden Project, which removes all pollution and such. The end game is up to the player. The subreddit is full of players recreating their home cities or trying to mimic real-life sprawl. I've personally had a project in mind of recreating Austin, Texas, one of my favorite cities, and then hitting I-35 with a tornado, much like I'd want to do in real life. Really, the sky is the limit, but I want to suggest just taking the knowledge you've accumulated and bring it to the next city and make it smarter and more efficient. Or buy new DLC and try to build around that. In conclusion, and I believe I've made the same point in my last two videos as well, please play this game and allow yourself to relax and build your city with a fine-tooth comb. Really allow your creativity to flow from you and watch the amazing things you can create. I've been Ropeburn. Please like and subscribe for the next video. And if you're curious why I've mentioned Dwarf Fortress a few times, check out my latest video on that game. Thanks for watching. P.S. A little bit of house cleaning here at the end. I want to thank all of y'all that checked my previous two videos out. Y'all really made my heart warm. I'm working really hard to find a way to improve my audio. I bought a cheap mic and I'm learning better ways to use it and to speak into it. I've never done this kind of work before, so I appreciate your patience. And if anyone has any suggestions on how to make my voiceover audio sound good relatively cheaply, please let me know in the comments. PSS, please like and subscribe. Bye-bye.